Good afternoon. I'm the 100 Proof News Hound here with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. And today's a real special episode. You might be wondering why I'm wearing this 1925 Equator brand Prince of Wales model pith helmet, because it's in honor of our guest, our subject for today. He's the real Indiana Jones. If Indiana Jones was not based on his life, it was based on someone who was exactly like our man. And our man is Dr. Roy Chapman Andrews. Well, remember to like and subscribe. And it just keeps you in touch and lets you know when we dropped a new episode, like the good one we're dropping right now. We're going to start off with Roy Chapman Andrews' obituary in the Syracuse Herald-Journal. It states, Dr. Roy, just to give you a flavor of what this man was all about. Dr. Roy Chapman Andrews, world-famous naturalist who wrote as eloquently of house cats as he did of whales and dinosaurs, is dead of a heart attack at 76. This is in 1960. The retired former director of the American Museum of Natural History in New York died on Monday. He graduated from in zoology from Beloit College in 1906 and went to New York, where he joined the museum staff. He began actually as a janitor at the museum and worked his way up to director. His first work was upon whales, which he studied off the Pacific coast. He traveled through Indonesia and North Korea, and on the Manchurian border conceived the idea of a series of expeditions to Central Asia under the sponsorship of the museum. On these trips, the biggest and most spectacular scientific expeditions any American had led up to that time, he collected vast quantities of prehistoric remains, brought back the first known dinosaur eggs, and a complete skeleton of the giant cousin of the rhinoceros, which is regarded as the largest mammal ever to walk the earth. Andrews wrote prolifically for scientific journals and popular readers on such subjects as whales, dinosaurs, prehistoric man, and exploring in general. Exploring is a good theme. At the end of our episode today, we're going to be making an explorer cocktail, so hang in there. His career began in 1909-1910. He sailed on the USS Albatross through Indonesia studying whales, and then later went up to the Arctic where he studied beluga whales. We first see him in the Buffalo News, Buffalo, New York, Wednesday, September 4th, 1912. Oh, and all the articles that I'm going to refer to today are from the Buffalo News. I've never seen a man who was more able to get into newspapers than was Roy Chapman Andrews. His life is the most well-documented scholarly life that you're going to see. Here we go at the beginning, though, in 1912. Headline, Explorer of the Korean Wilds. Roy Chapman Andrews' story of discovery. Located unknown lakes, found race which had never seen pale faces, and was exhibited in towns. Natural History Museum officer, first white man there. Remember, he's in Korea. Korea's been a civilized society for well over 1,000 years. They're describing it here like it's 1750 and he's encountering Plains Indians, or it's 1520 and he's going to talk to some Aztecs. This is sort of the tenor of what we're going to get through here. There's a lot of embellishment. There's a lot of over-the-top stuff in the coverage of Mr. Andrews, but bear with us because it does bear fruit. He notes that after finishing my whaling, I spent 3 weeks at Shimoshik, Japan, collecting fish, and then returned to Korea. Went to Seoul and interviewed the director of foreign affairs, from whom I got necessary permission to go into the interior. Well, into the interior he goes. From there, I went on a push railway. You get in a car and the natives push you up in handcars to a military station on the Tuatman River. The latter is a walled town, 500 years old. Yeah, it's a civilized country. He knows, though, that up there are leopards in tremendous numbers in many parts of the country, snow leopards, and there are tigers in many districts. Most people believe tigers are confined to hot countries, but those of Korea go way up the Amur River. They live among the rocks and live mainly on deer, which are to be found in great abundance. I never went from camp without seeing three or four tigers every time he left camp. Well, I hope he was well armed, because the tigers like to, you're on the menu when there's tigers around. Now, the next article is in February of 1915, and it sets the pattern here. He's always exploring. He's always somewhere in the world during the spring and summer months. He returns to the United States in the fall and winter in lectures. Here he is here in Buffalo, New York, and the headline is, We'll Lecture on Whales. Roy Chapman Andrews will lecture on camera hunting for whales. So hunting for whales with a camera. More than 100 lantern slides and about 800 feet of motion picture film will be used to illustrate his remarks. Mr. Andrews has made the study of whales his life work. Well, up until that point in time, we're going to see that changes. He will relate his adventures while carrying on his studies, and he would continue doing that for the rest of his life. The whale thing was an early infatuation of his, and when you read the articles, it's pretty wild. He's talking about harvesting whales for food. He cites the Japanese example. He says that whale tastes like venison, and you can get up to 80,000 pounds of meat from a single whale, which is basically the same as a whole herd of cattle. Fortunately for humanity, that didn't catch on. But anyways, he's back in the wild in 1919. He's in China now with an article here on December 18th. So he's returned from China, and the article is Lolo Hunters of Yunnan, Unique Folks, Little Known Inhabitants of Remote Province Described by Explorer. Mandarins hold power of life and death. Okay, two separate things here. There's the Lolo Hunters. He describes the Lolo Hunters. They're a tribe of hunters who he describes having, they have specific ceremonies that they perform depending on what kind of prey that they take down. He describes in detail two different antelopes and the two different types of ceremonies that they have with respect to each. He does note that they are one of the non-Han ethnic groups, and if we know anything about China now, if you're a non-Han ethnic group, you're probably being persecuted as we speak. With respect to persecution, though, he's talking about Mandarins, which are what he's referring to are bureaucrats, and one of the bureaucrats got in trouble. One of the Mandarins got in trouble because they denied the expedition's entrance into a specific area. They contacted Peking, and then he changed his mind. And it's noted, the immediate submission of the obstructing Mandarin and his later good offices to the expedition, however, did not save him. What happened? His own people, fearing punishment from Peking and resenting the insult to the white people of the party, whom they regarded as gods and goddesses, baloney, but that's back here where it's like he's Cortez and we're dealing with Aztecs. But here's what they did with the Mandarin. If it happened, this is right out of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. They seized him and boiled him alive in oil. I don't know if that really happened, but I think it happened in the Temple of Doom. Anyways, just in case you're following along at home, the Lolo Hunters are also known as the Nosu. Now, in October 1920, it's announced that he's going in search of a place where man had his origin. Expedition to try to learn locality where ape became human. Roy Chapman Andrews, Associate Curator of Mammals at the American Museum of Natural History, announced today he would soon leave the United States at the head of a scientific expedition through which he hopes to establish the origin of man and locate the most primitive human remains, the link between man and the ape. The ultimate destination of the expedition will be in Central Asia, where scientists believe that a man as distinct from the ape originated. The expedition is unparalleled in its scientific history, both for purposes and size. It is really a big expedition. Here's what it says. It will include botanists, zoologists, anthropologists, paleontologists, archaeologists, and other scientists. Said that and how much did all this fun cost? Well, it said $250,000. And where were they getting the money? Well, they passed the hat amongst the swells in New York, and guys like J.P. Morgan and W.A. Harriman were kicking in, so off they went. Well, what did they find? Well, Buffalo News again on February 23, 1921 will search in China trail of missing link. Third Asiatic expedition of naturalists starts on its quest. When I read the different articles is there was a lot of confusion of whether it was the first, second, third, or fourth expedition. Numbers were used almost interchangeable. Here they're calling this whatever they're talking about. Here the third. The third Asiatic expedition of the American Museum of Natural History, headed by Roy Chapman Andrews, left this city yesterday on a mission that will keep them in the vast, untrodden areas of Asia for 5 years. The mission is to obtain evidence that the missing link between man and monkey actually did exist. Now, how in the 3 million square miles of the Chinese subcontinent there, they thought they were going to find exactly the fossils they needed, I have no idea, but they're very optimistic back then. Mr. Andrews, who has led 2 other scientific parties into China, is accompanied by Mrs. Andrews. And you'll notice this throughout the 1920s. He brings his wife along, and she serves as the color photographer. Very progressive. Now, this is where we start getting the comparison to Indiana Jones. Anybody can just go out there and look for stuff. But this is the good Indiana Jones stuff. Headline, November 15th, 1923. Man-eating canines harassed explorers. Man-eating dogs, which attacked human beings on sight and without any provocation, were a constant menace to the lives of the Third Asiatic Expedition of the American Museum during its exploration of Mongolia, said Roy Chapman Andrews, leader of the party, in describing his experiences today. Members of the expedition on 3 occasions narrowly escaped death from these animals, he said. Not even Indiana Jones had to flee from man-eating dogs. But that's not all. On November 17th, 1929, in accompanying of a fine photograph in his Indiana Jones best, it says, bandits chased him, monstrous wild beasts attacked him, and once a couple of bamboo shoots were all that stood between him and a drop to death of 300 feet below. The only thing it didn't have, I guess, was a giant stone ball rolling down a ramp at you here. He claims the real thrill came when he discovered a heap of whitened bones and giant rhinoceros tooth on the Gobi Desert. In any event, the Indiana Jones comparisons continue. In another article on December 1st, 1923, accompanied by an even better photograph of Roy Chapman Andrews, scientist and explorer, will lecture in the Buffalo Club this evening. For the last 2 years, he's led Asiatic expeditions in search of traces of prehistoric life, making research in what the scientists call the field of paleontology and archaeology. So he's doing his normal routine here, where he's on the lecture circuit, spreading the good word throughout the winter months. There's an interesting article here, January 5th, 1924, and it's interesting from two perspectives. The first is, can you imagine this happening today in a newspaper? This is an article geared for children. The headline is "The Roosevelt Field Club. The Buffalo Society of Natural Sciences conducts this column for all children who love nature study and observations." And in this, they do a detailed analysis of what Roy Chapman is doing that year. It says, Roy Chapman Andrews, who was the representative from the American Museum of Natural History at the head of the last expedition into Mongolia, has recently returned with one of the most unusual finds yet. He unearthed from the old surface of Mother Earth, he brought back with him several dinosaur eggs, one of them so perfectly preserved that part of the shell can easily be seen. Others were larger and have the outside of them partly removed. They are in such perfect condition that the bones of the tiny baby dinosaurs can easily be distinguished within the mass which was once inside the eggs. Along with the eggs were found many portions of dinosaur skeletons, some of which were on exhibit at the museum, still in a state showing how they had been entombed in the fine, dry soil. And that article goes along with an article of February 16th, 1924 in the Buffalo News, which has a wonderful picture of the team working on dinosaur skeletons in the Gobi Desert. And it's noted, a remarkable achievement of the third Attic expedition is the unearthing, for the first time in the history of fossil hunting, of skeletons of prehistoric monsters in such variety of sizes and individual development that the entire cycle of life from the egg to the full-grown animal has been obtained for some species. And that's true in the area that they're working there. They do have the eggs and they have the full-grown skeletons there. The pictures of the egg was taken exactly as they were found. 2 were completely exposed. Broken shells of others were plainly visible, and 3 more were embedded in the rock. A few inches above the eggs lay the skeleton of the dinosaur, it says of ancestral type, the dinosaur of the family of the eggs. Now Roy Chapman Andrews gets in some more trouble. It says here on September 12, 1924, friends fear Andrews may be held in China. Word sought of noted explorer when arrest of foreigners is reported. His friends reported to the authorities yesterday, and efforts are being made to determine whether he is in danger. It was feared that he might be among the foreigners arrested in recent political upheavals. But Roy has his ways, and one of his friends notes, while the explorer might run into difficulties, his knowledge of the customs in the district and his friendship with some of the leaders in every faction would render him less prone to mishap than the average traveler, his friends say. Roy's got it in. He's got it in good with the man. He's becoming somewhat of a celebrity now. Well, he is a celebrity, but he's becoming sort of a role model here. And there's an article in September 20th, 1924, in the Buffalo newspaper, sort of. Well, it says, encourage the bad little boy in every man. It's kind of an anti-toxic masculinity scribe, saying let boys be boys to encourage their innovation. And with respect to our man, they say, nobody saw any future in his dreams of being a hunter and explorer. It seems a childish thing, a boy's dream, such as a man has no business to indulge in these days, unless as a recreation. But Andrews refused to give it up. Today, Roy Chapman Andrews is leading a third Asiatic expedition of the American Museum of Natural History. Expeditions under his leadership have already made exciting finds in the Gobi Desert. If Roy Chapman Andrews also had been the drably conventional good little boy who denied his dream and did just what he was told, he might by now be simply an instructor in paleontology in some university at $1,200 a year, rather tired, rather earnest, and rather unhappy. So let your little boys be boys and stop this anti-masculinity stuff. Anyways, here we are in March of 1925. Scientists to study ancient life in China. Third and best equipped expedition leaves San Francisco Saturday to seek fossils in desert of Gobi under Roy Chapman Andrews. So who's he taking with him this time? The third Asiatic expedition of the American Museum of Natural History will sail from San Francisco next Saturday to resume exploration of the Gobi Desert in western Mongolia. 13 scientific experts were in the expedition party which left New York last Thursday. The expedition plans to penetrate the remote and dangerous Gobi Desert in search of fossil specimens of ancient animal life. See, very shotgun approach there. today, if you're involved in this in archaeology or paleontology or any ology, all the groundwork has already been done. You're going to focus, your PhD thesis is going to be on one tiny little microscopic aspect of something. But back here, it's not that way. The field is wide open. He's talking mammals one day, man the other day, dinosaurs the next day. It's whatever comes to mind, because there's not been a lot of work done in any of these fields, and so he can be a generalist rather than a specialist. Now, May 9th, 1925, Andrews' party ready to explore in Gobi. Now they announced that they're ready. The Peking government, it is added, has refused to assume responsibility in case of bandit attacks, but the party is well armed. Very Indiana Jones. The expedition is equipped with 7 motor cars and 150 camels. And you know what's funny? I hadn't realized this until I started reading about the motor cars. We're going to get at the end where he wrote 22 books, and a couple of them were on the expeditions in the Gobi Desert. And I just realized yesterday that I actually read one of those books when I was like in grade 7. The memory of the automobiles going through the desert is etched on my mind, and has been for the last 50 years. So, anyways, I've been a fan of Roy's since the beginning, and I didn't even know it. Now, August 20th, 1925, R.C. Andrews ordered out of Mongolia. Explorer expelled for alleged political activities. What could that be about? He doesn't seem to be a man of politics. But there were a couple of guys in his group that probably shouldn't have been there. Saturday, August 29th, 1925, presence of British aroused Mongolians. Inclusion of lieutenant and consulate secretary cause of Andrews' expulsion. It turns out there were 2 fellows in the expedition that probably shouldn't have been there, British consulate officer and a British Army officer, and they didn't really have a good explanation of why they were in a scientific expedition, and so they were bounced at that point in time. And this is the beginning of some tough times that Roy has with the Chinese and Mongolian governments. He always manages to work his way out of it, but it's not as easy as it used to be. Back to some more normal exploring. September 12th, 1925, Andrews discovers mammals forebear. You notice when you're reading about his work is that nothing is ever just ordinary. Everything is new, is exciting. Small finds lead to leaps of logic and theory. Well, I'll give you an example here. They found 6 true mammalian skulls in the Gobi Desert. Geologists pronounced that the skulls are 2 million to 3 million years older than the age of mammals. How on earth do they know that? There's no method at that time. They don't have, other than stratigraphy, where you're just looking at where it is in the rock, but you have no idea how old those particular rocks are. Now with nuclear technology and that, they can make much better estimates. Back in the 1920s, it's all about, it's thumbwork and guesswork here. We believe, he said, that we have found traces of the earliest types of man developing out of the ape, as well as indications of a civilization that went from Europe to Asia. And then it goes in the next paragraph, although no human bones were found. They didn't find any bones. They found some tools, and they made these giant suppositions. Those tools could be anywhere from 4,000 to 400,000 years old. They have no idea. But he has an idea. It's printed in the newspapers around the world as if it's a fact. November 5th, 1925, remains of Asian culture found that antedate Europe by 10,000 years. Petrify redwood forest proves Mongolia's oldest dry land in the world, Roy Chapman Andrews says. And in the article here talks about how old the petrified trees are. They're off by millions and millions of years. And he uses his numbers to bolster his theorems. And he's not challenged on anything, because this is back in the 1920s. There really isn't anyone else doing the work, so there's no one to challenge him. This is a classic piece of self-promotion. The Buffalo News of November 10th, 1925. It's got a picture of Roy Chapman Andrews and a giant vulture. It says, RCA, the noted explorer and head of the Third Asiatic Expedition of the American Museum of Natural History, arriving home with his pet vulture, Connie, who has a 10-foot wingspan and is the only known vulture of the black variety to ever have been captured. Baloney. I'm sure he's the first guy ever to capture a bird. It will only eat fresh meat and has become very fastidious. But he's out there self-promoting. And I guess you have to do that if you're going to get funding. If you're going to convince the Vanderbilts of the world to flip you $1 million to go on these expeditions, you got to show that you're doing some good work. And so he's constantly, as we've shown here, he's constantly in the press here. May 3rd, 1926, Peking, after having been thrice confiscated by the military, Roy Chapman Andrews' camel train has at last left Kalgan, starting for the new Asiatic expedition under heavy guard. So they were well armed before, they're under heavy guard now. There's bandits, there's tigers, good stuff. June 7th, 1926, bones of primitive animal discovered. Ancient Chinese superstition results in rare findings by American. Now they talk about here, This actually happened. They're talking about dragon bones. The Chinese were grinding up fossilized bones, calling them dragon bones and using them in the traditional medicines. Chapman just re-engineered it and he just re-engineered, went back to the source. He used the provision of the dragon bones to go back and find the quarry to get the source of the fossils. And he made some great discoveries: bisons and skeletons of monkeys and ancestors of lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! Now, here's a good headline: September 9th, 1926. Chinese bandits hold up Gobi Desert expedition. The Roy Chapman Andrews expedition has abandoned efforts to further explore the Gobi Desert following refusal of Chinese bandits to permit the party to enter Mongolia. They were probably shaking them down. They didn't have the requisite cash to bribe them, and so they're returning. The next headline from September 16th, 1927 is even bolder. War stops expedition. The expedition of the American Museum of Natural History of Mongolia is called off for this year because of the military situation in China. Reports from China have declared that Chinese scientific organizations in Peking, and this is the real reason, they're calling off because of this, but the Chinese are resenting the extraction of their treasures, both ancient and modern. Reports from China have declared that Chinese scientific organizations in Peking are becoming opposed to foreigners taking rare specimens out of the country, and that's the real problem. And in the next couple of years, he runs into more of that. All right, here in April 17th, 1928, explorers braved the perils of Gobi Desert to prove origins. Andrews' party off to trace Pro-Man. By Pro-Man, they're talking about Proto-Man, someone predating modern man. Seeking traces of the Pro-Man, ancestor of the human race, the American Museum of History's fourth Central Asiatic expedition led by Roy Chapman Andrews today departed from Kalgan toward the western edge of the Gobi Desert, south of the Altai Mountains. The expedition comprised of 10 Americans and 26 Chinese, and this is what you're going to see here now. The Chinese want a piece of the action, so they got 26 Chinese specialists in here. They're using 8 motor trucks, besides a caravan of 125 camels. In order to cross bandit-infested areas, Mr. Andrews concluded a monetary bargain with the predominant bandit chief, guaranteeing safe conduct for the trip. So last year he got bounced because he didn't bring enough cash. This year he brought the cash. Now, gunplay. We've got gunplay, but it's actually kind of funny. May 18th, 1928, explorer shot in accident. Now you're thinking here he was out hunting and stuff. He was actually trying to shoot a rabbit in the camp, and the gun discharged as he's pulling out of his holster, and he shot himself in the foot. Well, anyways, that's not bad. I mean, at least it was an injury caused by a gun. Now, here's one of the, I was going to say stupider, but here's one of the stupider things here. Monster reported largest Woolworth building. And it's August 16th, 1928. There's an article that is continued in September 24th, 1928 with the photograph. The head bones of prehistoric monster unearthed by Roy Chapman Andrews at the southern edge of the Gobi Desert were described by him today as indicating the existence of a colossal animal about the size of the Woolworth building. The Woolworth building is 792 feet tall. When you look at the size of the vertebrae that they're looking at on the September 24th, 1928 article, they're big sauropod kind of things, brontosaurus or bigger. But these are 100-foot animals, not 800-foot animals. That's bizarre beyond bizarre. There's a very nice spread of photographs in November 8th, 1928 article in the Buffalo News under the headline, New York Museum Expedition Seeks Origin of Man in Gobi Desert. He's constantly in the press. He's in the press, I would say on average at least monthly, and during some years he's in there every couple of weeks. I have no recollection of any archaeologist ever being in the newspaper at any point in my life, and yet he manages to be in the newspaper 12 to 20 times a year. Now here in November 1928, Andrews plans new expedition to Gobi. Famous scientist hopes to find burial places of ancient race. The next expedition with Roy Chapman Andrews leads into the Gobi Desert will seek the burial places of a race who inhabited the interior of China millions of years ago, the noted explorer said last night. Now, based on what we know, Peking man, which is actually a thing, the oldest fossilized humans in China go back maybe as 800,000 years. He's talking about going back millions. He has no sense of time or place, but he can get away with that because nobody has any sense of time and place at that point in time. Andrew said that the human beings who probably migrated to eastern China and to Europe are known to have lived in the once fertile Gobi Desert in an age far older than any previously studied. He said these people influenced the races of Europe, but that it was not known whether or not they had any relation with the American Indians. He's just throwing stuff out there at this point in time. What's funny? He's really a good archaeologist. He does find lots of interesting stuff. It's just his interpretation expeditions, and his conclusions based on scanty evidence that ring a little humorous to the modern mind. Here we hinted that the Chinese don't want things taken out of the country. Here's a headline: Wednesday, April 17th, 1929. Explorer may defer Mongol expedition. Andrews finds Chinese want all discoveries without sharing expense. The Chinese want us to spend all the money and do all the work, and they want to take everything we get. I will not move a foot outside Peking under such circumstances. Says he'd rather return to America than work for that. Well, he needs his fossils in order to justify the huge expense of these expeditions, and the Chinese are horning in on it here. But they work it out. By June of 1929, Chinese raised ban on Andrews relics. Shipment of 1928 collection is now allowed. Future finds to be under new law. They bring in a law to split the goods. So they'll do the expedition. They'll pay for the expedition, but at the end of the day, they've worked on a formula to split the goods. You know you've made it as an archaeologist when you appear in advertising, and this is really cool. The Buffalo News, October 30th, 1929, has some drawings of dinosaurs, and the headline is "Baked, Then Frozen." And it's about batteries, car batteries. Roy Chapman Andrews made remarkable discoveries of bones of prehistoric animals millions of years old in the wilds of central China. T.J. Mackenzie, his chief of motor transport, writes of Exide batteries, in temperatures varying from 40 degrees below zero to 120 above, they have always responded. In terrific blizzards, mud, snow, and rain, they've never failed to act. And then they give the pitch about why you should be using Exide batteries. So he's well enough known that he's a pitchman now for a battery company. December 1929, discovery of fossils hailed by Andrews. Of course he's going to hail it. He found the fossils. He's hailing everything. Brain case will show whether early man walked erect, explorer opines. And they're talking that being 1 million years old and that it has a certain shape, then we know that it was walking erect. He's jumping on the bandwagon here of Peking Man, which are discoveries that are being made at the same time in the 20s outside Peking, China, and he's saying that he's got fossils that are probably even a little older, and the people are walking upright that we know. Now, October 7th, 1930, in the Buffalo News, Andrews returns to Peking. Now, Peking is the same as it's the capital. Prehistoric collection of anthropologists includes bones of animals millions of years old, bringing a record bag of prehistoric fossils, just bringing them back by the bag. The Central Asiatic expedition led by Roy Chapman Andrews, the American anthropologist, returned here today after 5 months of intensive work in the Gobi Desert. They say they got 75 different species, but no human remains. You know, and it's funny because that's really what he's after. He wants to prove the missing link and prove the ape-human relationship, but he speculates, but he was never able to find the bones that did that. Now, headline in 1931. July 2nd, in the Buffalo paper. Roy Chapman Andrews is barred. Roy Chapman Andrews, widely known American scientist, was barred from conducting his proposed expedition into the Gobi Desert by the Chinese authorities Thursday. In a communique explaining their attitude, the Chinese officials referred to Andrews' arrogant attitude and said he had been excavating valuable scientific material from Chinese territory under the cover of a passport for hunting. So they're finding him to be arrogant. Is it possible that that celebrity is going to his head? Is it possible that he doesn't think he has to go through normal channels because he's such a shooter? Maybe that. Maybe so. What else has happened here? Well, it had some effect. Remember, his wife was always on the expeditions with him as the color photographer? Well, in 1931, April, Roy Chapman Andrews, famous explorer, has been divorced on the grounds of desertion. Then they do a little snark. This just goes to show that you can't stay away from Little Woman a year or two and then get away with it by saying you're out getting some dinosaur eggs. So it's had some effect. It had some effect on his family life. And he transitions now into the part of his career where it's mostly platitudes and awards. And on March 16th, 1931, he's in a tuxedo and a lovely presentation for his discoveries relative to prehistoric man in Central Asia. Dr. Roy Chapman received the Hubbard Gold Medal from the National Geographic Society. So now he's getting medals to honor him for his work. And now he becomes a spokesperson. He's 10:30 p.m. WGR Radio, November 18th, 1931. He's appearing on the Coca-Cola program. Roy Chapman Andrews, great discoverer of the beginning of mankind, interviewed by Grantland Rice. Grantland Rice was the greatest sportscaster of his day. So, and it goes Gustav Hunchen directing the famous all-string Coca-Cola orchestra. So he's now He's now a media celebrity here. And right after this, he becomes the director of the American Museum of Natural History, which he serves as director from 1934 to 1942. And it was a tough job. He was the director during the Great Depression. Holding together a not-for-profit when no one's got no money is probably a fairly difficult thing to do, and he was able to do it. Now, coming out the back end of it, when he's in retirement, he continues to be a celebrity. Here in the Buffalo News, Wednesday, January 31, 1945, on the show at 9 p.m., Keep Up with the World, Roy Chapman Andrews, famed author and explorer, tells some little-known facts about the world we live in. And that was the ad here's for WGR radios, but that was part of a radio syndicate that was broadcast coast to coast. He continues to be a celebrity. In the 1950s, he writes books. He eventually writes 22 books. They include Whale Hunting with Gun and Camera, Across Mongolian Plains, On the Trail of Ancient Man, Exploring with Andrews, All About Dinosaurs, All About Whales, and In the Days of the Dinosaur. Those 22 books, he published them about one a year in his retirement, and along with his media appearances, kept him quite busy. We've already read his obituary. He dies in 1960. As I said at the beginning, if Indiana Jones was not based on this gentleman, if Indiana Jones was not based on this man's life, then it was based on somebody exactly the same. We've got an individual here who was was as learned as Indiana Jones, as adventurous as Indiana Jones, and as far as I see, actually made more discoveries than Indiana Jones, because every time Indiana Jones seemed to find something, it got taken away from him. Well, that leads us to the part of the program where we make our cocktail. And believe it or not, there's such a thing as an explorer. They call it an explorer martini. It's really an explorer cocktail. But if you want to call it a martini, that's fine. What it is it's a three-parter, simple stuff. It's 1/3 blended Scotch whiskey, 1/3 amaretto, and 1/3 dry sherry. You can use an Amontillado if you'd like. Those things, consider this like a Negroni. These are mixed over ice. In a rock glass, or you can stir and then pour it into a chilled champagne glass. Still a chilled martini glass. Either way will work. Now remember to like and subscribe, and I hope that you enjoyed our Dinosaur Hunter presentation today. So we'll see you next week. Everyone be safe out there. Take care. Bye.